to the Azerothian Embassy. Today we're going to... Fitz, I thought if we got you a pet, you might cheer up, stop scaring all our guests. Train it, or I'll have the hunter dispose of it. As I was saying, come, take a seat by the fire. The Blue Dragonflight. Always awe-inspiring and often controversial. True masters of magic. But does that mean they get to decide who can use it? Let's have a look at their history, and you can tell me what you think. I know there's a comment box around here somewhere. The Blue Flight has similar origins to its four counterparts. A great battle long ago was fought against a humongous cannibalistic worm named Galakrond. And after the battle was won, the Keeper Tyr saw great potential in 5 of the many dragons that fought. He convinced the Titans that imbuing these proto-dragons with a small amount of ancient power, they would make the perfect protectors for Azeroth. One of these 5 was Malygos, the eldest, a huge and ancient drake with scales that shimmered from purest blue to a crystal silver. The cleverest of his kind, he was always thoughtful, trying to stay one step ahead. Upon receiving the Titan's blessing, it was Norgannon that imbued him with his arcane power. He was charged with guarding arcane magic in the world, and would earn himself the title, the Spellweaver. The Blue Flight began to flourish just like the other 4. The time would come to be known as the Age of Dragons, and saw them reach the zenith of their mighty civilization. That is, until the Night Elves under the rule of Queen Azshara dabbled in too much magic, and attracted the attention of the Burning Legion, a demonic army led by the Mad Titan Sargeras, intent on destroying life in the universe. When the Legion attacked, the Blue Flight, under the leadership of Malygos, was quick to act, and immediately began to help. Neltharion, leader of the Black Flight, however, had a plan to repel them once and for all. He suggested they create a magical device imbued with a portion of each flight's power. He would name it the Dragonsoul, and Malygos, sensing the imminent threat, was the first to agree. After the device was made, Neltharion used it to great effect against the Legion, decimating huge swaths of their army, until, in an act that took the other flights by surprise, he turned it against the mortal defenders and the other dragonflights themselves. Malygos was outraged, but alas, was unable to resist the sheer power of the weapon. That is, until a red dragon managed to disrupt Neltharion, only for a brief moment, and gave way for the other flights to counterattack. Malygos, now enraged at the betrayal, was the first to lead his flight against Neltharion and his brood, but it came at a terrible price. Once again the device was fully unleashed, almost instantly killing every blue dragon in an instant. As the other flights ready to attack, Neltharion retreated, leaving the decimated blue flight in his wake. Malygos and a handful of other blue drakes had survived, but his prime mate Sindragosa was slain, and her body strewn across the northern icy wastes, only to later be raised into undeath by the Lich King. A few of the blue dragon eggs that remained were sent to a pocket dimension where time ran more slowly. This was to safeguard the future of the Blue Flight. Never again have any of the dragonflights truly recovered from the events of that day, the Azure brood most of all. His rage, his grief, it began to consume him, and in the madness that was shrouding his mind, he cleaved the Caldara off from the mainland of Borean Tundra, and brought the surviving blue dragons there. They would carve new homes within the Nexus and withdraw from the world of Azeroth. As Malygos was lost to madness, many of the Blue Flights still continued their magical experiments. During these experiments, they contacted a strange entity believed to be from another dimension. It was suffused with arcane power. The entity was named Aluneth, and intrigued, they summoned it into our realm. Immediately, the being went on a rampage, destroying much, but was eventually contained. A few years of harmless study, and then they would send it back. Until later, it would play an important role for a mage named Aegwynn. The aftermath of the War of the Ancients saw the world sundered, and many of the elves that relied upon the Well of Eternity for magical sustenance began to feel the addiction eating at their mind. The Shandaral were among these, and now living in close proximity to the Blue Flight and seeing their experiments, they observed that they were turning living things to crystal and absorbing it as magic. This, they thought, was their salvation. The elves broke into the Nexus vaults and stole the spellcraft, but their addiction got the best of them. They began to steal magical artifacts kept there, and in doing so triggered the wards. This alerted the Blue Flight, and they quickly gave chase to the thieves. They gathered on a cliff overlooking a forest, hoping to turn a small area to crystal and use its powers to save themselves from the furious dragons. But it went horribly wrong, and the entire forest of Moonsong and all of its inhabitants were instantly crystallized. Much time passed, and other than the hoarding of magical artifacts, the Blue Flight stayed out of mortal affairs. That is, with the exception of Arcanagos, who attempted to stop Medivh, now under control of Sargeras, from opening a portal for the Burning Legion. He would aid Aegwynn in a great battle against him, but as mighty as the dragon was, he was outmatched, and found himself burned from the inside out, leaving nothing but a husk. Later, he would be raised as a Fel Dragon, and be known forevermore as Nightbane. Around 1,000 years ago, the Blue Dragonflight were called upon for aid. The Qiraji War was raging onwards, a war against giant insectoid creatures under the command of the old gods, who were threatening to swarm all of Azeroth. Arygos, the child of Malygos, who was born of the clutch that hatched slowly in the pocket dimension, led the charge. With the Dragonflight's combined might, they pushed back the Qiraji and sealed them away within Ankh-Qiraj. Although the Blue Flight saw minimal losses, Arygos was believed lost. He had charged into the ruins during the final push. Although he was not dead, himself, a green and red dragon were all captured and then tortured by the Qiraji lords, until many years later they were freed. Shortly before the Second War, Neltharion, now known as Deathwing, started to make his moves once again. He had found something useful in the form of an orc warlock named Necros. He led him to the Dragonsoul, which had also been renamed to the Demon Soul, and he would have him use it to subjugate the Red Flight. The other flights were called upon for aid, but when Malygos was approached, the madness still had a tight grip over him. He was indifferent to Alexstrasza's pleas, until much persuasion, mainly in the form of what a grateful Lifebinder could do for him and his decimated brood. A great battle at the fortress of Grim Batol took place, and a human mage that was aiding the Red Dragons managed to slay Necros and shatter the demon's soul. The sudden rush of power surged back into the aspects, and they were made whole once more. They fought back with tremendous force and forced Neltharion's retreat. After the battle was won, Malygos returned to his seclusion once more, although the rest of his flight did start taking a more active role in Azeroth once more. The next time we hear of the Blue Flight is in the aftermath of the Third War. The Sunwell, a font of huge magical power, had been destroyed, and the kingdom of Quel'Thalas had been ravaged. Sensing a great surge of magic, Kalagos was sent to investigate. He was young, but even early on Kalagos showed great talent for spellcraft, and his mate, Tiragoza, followed shortly after. The two dragons journeyed to Quel'Thalas along with a human paladin and a strange peasant girl that turned out to be the avatar of the Sunwell, the raw magic given human form. At the end of their adventures, together they freed the Red King consort that was enslaved by the Lich King's forces, and Kalagos, after swearing to protect the avatar, would remain here as her guardian for some time. As the events of the Third War played out, strange rumours reached the Blue Flight. Reports of nether-infused dragons found in the shattered world of Outlands. It was discovered after investigation that these were the wayward spawn of Deathwing. The nether-twisted dragonlings were being subjugated and used by the Death Knights of the Shadow Council. In an attempt to restore them, the progeny were brought back to Azeroth and allowed to feed on the magical energies of the Nexus. They gorged themselves full, and then turned on the Blue Dragons, declaring themselves as magic incarnate, starting a full-scale assault. The commotion had awoken the mad dragon Malygos from his slumber, and he absorbed the essence of the nether dragons into himself. This sudden surge of magic actually had a positive effect. It allowed him to finally shrug off the insanity that had infected his mind for so long. Now, finally having clarity, he began to assess the magical situation in Azeroth, and found that mages were being reckless once again. His last true memory was the elves attracting the Burning Legion, and the shattering of the world. He was determined to not let this happen again. Malygos began to siphon the arcane magic out of Azeroth using the ley lines. They are streams of magic that run throughout the world, and in doing so marked the beginning of the Nexus Wars. As the arcane power surged through the Nexus, the consequences were dire. The power had begun to surge so violently that the crust was splintering, and unstable rifts began to open. While many mages swore to resist the Blue Flight until the end, strangely, some would actually join the flight and become mage hunters. This action was also condemned by the other flights, who established the Wormrest Accord and allied with the mage resistance in order to stop the senseless violence. With no other way to end the war, their hand was forced, and Malygos was slain. With no aspect to guide them, both Kalagos and Arygos tried to lead, but their viewpoints could not be further apart. Kalagos, after learning the origins of the Blue Flight, would try and restore them. He would want the Blue Flight to take a more active role within the mortal world once again. Arygos, however, would side more with Malygos's beliefs, that all magic should be guarded and kept out of mortal hands that would abuse it. A great celestial event was upon them, named the Embrace, where the two moons of Azeroth would finally be in conjunction. An old legend says that the Embrace also happened at the same time as the first proto-dragons were made into the aspects, and that either the magic of the event was required, or maybe this was just the perfect time to choose. While Kalagos just looked on in amazement at this spectacular event with the other dragons, Arygos was not leaving things to chance. He believed his blood gave him the right to lead, and would attempt to ensure victory, and allied himself with Deathwing. For a brief moment all stood still as the blue dragons shimmered in the light of the two moons. Kalagos, however, shone more brightly, and in this moment was granted the powers of the blue aspect. Feeling betrayed and outraged, Arygos fled, and in his wake the Blue Flight were assaulted by the Twilight Dragons of Deathwing, under the command of Archbishop Benedictus, now named the Twilight Father. But alas, Arygos was himself betrayed. He was slain, and his blood used to activate the focusing iris to further the dark goals of the Twilight cult. So much misfortune and tragedy has befallen these truly miraculous dragons. Although, it's hard to remember that when they're policing you for using something as natural as magic. Who would you have chosen as the new leader? Maybe you think Malygos did nothing wrong. How about you tell me? Sorry to rush off, but I guess we have another podling problem. Time to move on to a new pet, I think. Come back anytime.